All right.
Hello, everyone. I'm Judy, one of the managing directors of Governance Junction, and today myself and Derek, our other managing director, will be talking to you today about constitutions. Constitutions are a really important part of your organisation because it's your guidance tool. So I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Derek.
Thanks, Judy. I'll get straight into it and share my screen here. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our fifth in this series of YouTube presentations, short governance topics that Judy and I have found have come up in the work that we do in terms of questions and relevance. And so we're trying to just fill a bit of a gap here. So today, as Judy said, what makes for a good constitution? This is our fifth one and follows on from the previous ones where we talked about, what is a charity versus not-for-profit, the best structure. We talked about social purpose, which will come up in what we're talking about today. Last week, we talked about just some basic principles, some of the history of corporate governance. So without any further waffle from me, we'll get into it. So what makes for a good constitution? And I can hear the audience say to me, why is this worth 30 minutes? You set up an organization, you set up your constitution, file it appropriately to ASIC or to the state authorities. When you set up your not-for-profit, why does it matter? Why we never come back to the constitution? Why are we even talking about it? And the reason we're talking about, the reason we thought this would be worthy of 30 minutes of one of our videos is because more and more we're seeing people having to go back and revisit their constitution. Or finding that, particularly as years progress, that the constitution is actually formed a barrier to their organisation moving forward because it was either put in place some time back, sometimes many, many years, or when it was put in place, it wasn't particularly well constructed. And of course, it has caused problems for them now. So we're seeing more and more people come to us and say, hey, can you help us redo this? And when we're finding that many people on charity boards of charities and not-for-profits are not really understanding of what the constitution is and how much of a really important role it plays. So we're going to use the theme begin as you mean to end, and we've used that before, and it's a theme I like to use when we talk about governance, but particularly in putting together a constitution. So the first question has to be, well, what is a constitution? Well, first and foremost, let's make no mistake about this. Unlike some other documents you might have in governance, such as charters, board charters and things, which are all really important, the constitution is a legal document. Okay, it is what is known in generic terms as the governing document. It is actually a contract of form. It is a contractual relationship between the organisation, and in particular, if you're an incorporated organisation, the organisation is a separate person. It's a quasi-person to the directors and to the members. So it's between the organisation, it's between the members, the company secretary, and the directors. So it is actually defines that relationship. All entities, all businesses in Australia, whether they're commercial or not-for-profit, that are incorporated, must have a governing document. The only exception may be an unincorporated association may not have a governing document. There's no requirement for an unincorporated association to have one. We'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. in the world of not-for-profits, so there's probably more focus on the constitution. And I agree, you know, particularly small business, family business, private companies, PTY limited companies, they do have their constitution set up at the time that they create the organisation, then it's basically very rarely referred back to. But in the world of not-for-profit and charities, it is something that is important, and it goes back to one of our previous videos, because it is here in the Constitution that you'll find the social purpose or the objects or whatever you want to call it. That is where it is written down. That is where it was scrutinised by the ACNC and the ATO, and is scrutinised to see whether it constitutes you being a charity, or even better than that, constitutes, determines by the ATO that you can get DGR status. So the Constitution is probably more relevant than in private business than we would see. So we do come back to it. And as I said to the start, more and more of our clients are coming back and having to redo their constitution. And some people may say, and they might be saying now, yeah, but my not-for-profit doesn't have one, and I'm not an unincorporated association. We don't have a thing called a constitution. Well, you do, but it might be called something different. It might be known as the rules. So typically, an association has rules, and these can be called the association rules, or rules of the association, or could be called the model rules. Now, what each state does to assist founders when they're putting together their not-for-profit, what they do is they have a set of model rules. So what they see is the minimum requirement for the governing document that you can download and you can accept as your rules, or, as I said, rules or constitution. You can also download the same from the ACNC. They have theirs. Theirs is a little bit more involved, and you can download theirs as well and modify that. Or you can draft your own from scratch or modify the above, okay? So it really is, again, so much in governance, particularly between, you know, the world of a company and the world of an association. It's just a play on words. If we look at it as simply a governing document, as a legal document, as I said, as that contract between all those parties, then it forms the same role, okay? Now, unincorporated associations, they're not required to have one unless, however, unless they want to be registered as a charity with the ACNC. And if they choose to want to do that, then of course they have to produce a governing document. It's a bit different to an incorporated association, because, as I said, there is no separation between the parties in an unincorporated association. So it's basically an agreement between members. Typically, what does a constitution contain? And we'll use the word constitution rather than jumping between constitution and rules, just to make this a bit more easier, make it easier to understand. It usually details, you know, the obvious, the name, most importantly, and I probably should highlight this bullet, the charitable purpose of the organisation, the social purpose or the objects. We've talked about this in a previous video, such an important part of a not-for-profit, and that's where you'll find it. And it's usually right up front in the document. You know, it's usually, you know, the after the name, it'll be the purpose. That's how important it is. Also, it's very important within the Constitution actually says that you are a not-for-profit and that you actually won't distribute any funds back to members, okay? So it actually requires to state that in the Constitution, be very clear on that. And there's a whole lot of stuff on membership. Who is a member, different types of membership, how somebody can join as a member, and all that type of stuff. In fact, a large chunk of the Constitution is made up of stuff around membership if you're a company limited by guarantee, it must state the liability, the limit of liability, and it's usually like $10, or perhaps in a bigger company limited by guarantee, it might be like $100, but it must state what that limit is. And we've said before, that limit defines, if the company winds up, what is the liability of that winding up, the debts, etc., to the members. And that's why it's usually a fairly inconsequential amount. Okay, it talks about the meetings, the AGMs and general meetings, how they're conducted, how they're called, under what circumstances they call, and what those meetings discuss. It talks about how finances are recorded, and if there are auditors required or chosen to be used, then it defines how those auditors are appointed. Then it has a large piece about the board, about directors or the management committee in terms of how they're elected, how long they can stay on the board, how they can be removed, and then how the meetings, the board meetings, how they proceed, how they should be conducted. And it talks a lot about, good model, good governing documents talk about things like conflicts of interest and such. It talks about keeping minutes. If the organisation does have DGR status, it's very important in the Constitution that it talks about those what they call gift funds. And if you are choosing to go down the path of DGR status, please get the right advice in putting together your governing document around that, okay? Because that DGR or seeking DGR status requires certain elements of the Constitution to be included around gift funds. Talks about where to deliver notices, what to do when there are disputes, etc., indemnity insurance, particularly for officers and directors of the organisation. And finally, should the organisation be wound up, what happens? Basically, what happens? In particular, what happens with the gift funds, okay, if they've been collected. So there's a lot in there. The model rules that you download are quite simple, but they don't necessarily, some of them don't pass muster to get through the ACNC, the ATO, for what is the new level of scrutiny on those things. So, it contains all this information. Now, remember, this is a legal document and it can't be changed that easily. It can only be changed, by the members. And we'll talk about why are we talking about this and why is this important? Because it's very interesting. It's very interesting to understand this background information. But so what? Okay. Once it's in place, if you put it in place, what does it matter? Well, it matters a lot, because constitutions, as they get older, if they're not well thought out when they're put together, they become a blocker. They can stop you moving forward. Now, I have had people on boards who have attempted to remove board members or put new board members on their board, and want to change the mix of the board. And some of them are a bit sort of ignorant as to how the Constitution works or the role of the Constitution, and try and do these things, and invariably come up against the Constitution, because it's a legal document. It defines how boards are put together. And more than anything else, because you can't, as a board, you can't terminate, you can't fire other directors. If something's not working out, it's not up to the board to remove them unless they've done something really, really, conducted themselves very poorly, broken the law and such. They can't easily be removed. And so when putting together a constitution, you have to think forward, you have to think ahead about your organisation and how it will evolve, and think of the future. Think about, how you want the board to change, how you want the board to come together, how you want the board to board members to progress through the organisation. You can't generally change a constitution quickly. You can't suddenly decide we need to change it next week. Many constitutions say that you can only change it at the AGM. So if you want to make changes to it, then you might be looking at only being able to do that once a year. And if some people put stuff in constitutions that shouldn't be in there, that is more about management, operations, getting into too much detail about how the board works, and then of course they've locked themselves into into that via the legal nature of the constitution. They can't change it, and then, you know, as I said, it might be 12 months, one chance a year to make those changes. So for this reason, they can, particularly as they get older, particularly as decades pass, they can limit your ability to move forward. So what are we recommending here? What would we do? Begin as you mean to end. Okay. So if you are starting up, let's deal with the starting up scenario. So if you're starting up, or you're having to change your governing documents, and I've had this, the ACNC have said to organisations, hey, this is too old, this constitution needs to change. If you're in that situation, then don't waste that opportunity. As we talked about when we talked about the social purpose, if you've got the chance to bring the key people together, whether it's board members, whether it is founders, whether it is members, bring them together and work through the social purpose and work through what this new constitution should look like. And think it forward. Think about what's the social purpose? What's the board mix and makeup? How are you going to, you know, ensure, and we will talk about this in later webinars, but how are you going to make sure about maintaining a level of independence on the board? When we say independence, we're talking about independence of thought and independent thinking. And the longer board members stay on a board, then the less independent they become. Now, I get it. It is very hard to get volunteers in the not-for-profit space to go onto boards. And we do find many board members staying there for a long time because of that reason. But either way, you know, accepting that situation exists, setting up a constitution so that you have the ability to limit tenure to, say, 3 years or so, that you put things into the constitution that define that the board should look at some sort of skills matrix, embark upon some recruiting process every year, something like that. There are a lot of creative stuff you can do, and Judy and I can help you with that in terms of what you can do in putting that together in your constitution to future-proof, if you like, your governing document. You can also make reference to your standards of governance in there as well. The ACNC love to see that that their standards there are being adhered to or respected, or at least, you know, aspired to. And if you are thinking that in the future you will want to pursue DGR, then put it in the constitution now while you're changing it. Because as I said, once it's in place, making changes to it, getting it changed by members can be a slow and sometimes difficult process to take. And many boards that we work with are under the misapprehension that they can do certain things, make certain decisions, change the constitution, and it's at their whim, and it is not. The constitution, rightly so, really belongs to the members. And so think about that. Get that agreement up front. Think future. Think years ahead. And if you've got that opportunity, create something that will hold you in good stead, both now and years to come. We have a checklist around putting together a good constitution. Talk to us about that checklist if you're in this situation where you are about to change your governing document. We can certainly help you, and certainly help you make it, as we said before, creative. So in summary, the constitutional rules are the governing document. They are a contract. They're a legal document. And it defines that relationship between the organisation, between the members and its directors. Generally, they're not, once they're in place, they're not easily changed. So when you have that opportunity to change them, whether you're starting out or you're changing them for, you're choosing to change it, or you've been asked to change it by somebody like the ACNC, then don't waste the opportunity. Don't waste the opportunity for the sake of expedience, of doing it quickly, or cost. Use that opportunity to get it right and think forward, okay? Because we are seeing more and more where old constitutional rules can limit progress, and even constitutional rules that aren't that old, that have been poorly drafted, can also limit the progress as well, okay? Don't waste that opportunity for change. Just like we said with the social purpose, if you've got the opportunity to bring those parties together, founders, members, board members, etc., to talk this through, it's an opportunity to think forward about what the organisation will look like, you know, where it will go. Use that opportunity. Don't waste it, and always begin with the end in mind. Okay, so that was our brief blurb on constitutions. So, Judy.
We definitely cover a lot in that. What always amazes me about constitutions, if somebody wants to change and they say, oh, I only want to change this one little section. And you have to remind people, and people need to be aware that changing that one section flows through onto other sections. It's very much a breathing document in its own right, which kind of freaks a lot of people out, I think. I don't know if you found that, but I've certainly had.
Oh, yeah. You know, people don't pay any attention to the Constitution. In fact, they operate outside the Constitution in some ways, which is also dangerous. That could come back to bite them. But then when they need to make a change, they realise just how limited they are and how difficult it is to get it to change. Okay. And
I was talking to a few people the other day about it. I was talking to a few people the other day about, and they said, well, they're recently going onto boards, and of course, I'm a registered company auditor, so the question came up: what are the first, 3 things I should ask for? I said the first thing you should ask for is the Constitution.
Yep.
That's the first thing you need to read through, because you need to understand the organisation you're with, a profit and loss, and a cash flow, and a balance sheet.
And and that's a really good point, Jude. And if you are contemplating, and it's very flattering to be asked to go onto a board, but you should conduct your due diligence. And if you've got an organisation that is reluctant to pass across something like the Constitution, although these things are also easily downloaded, I guess, from the ACNC, you have to question whether that's a board you want to be on.
Oh, absolutely. And organisations are required to actually keep a copy of their constitution within their files, whether that's electronic or in a filing cabinet at the back of the office.
Yeah,
it's a part of the records, and it is actually a part of the constitution that actually stipulates that if somebody wants to come and have a look at one, they're entitled to see one.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And but yeah, it's just again, the reason for choosing this as a topic today is because we're just seeing more and more of this coming up these days, as the ACNC in particular are really taking a microscope to constitutions and rules and things. So yeah.
And how often people misread a constitution? They misunderstand the difference between a general meeting of the board and a general meeting of the members.
Oh, and they also misunderstand the kind of importance of the Constitution too. Particularly if on the board, they don't realise that this document defines how they're to operate. And they can't operate outside that document. And a lot of people don't understand that point. And it's a reminder again when we talked about corporate governance, last time, about the basic principles of it, is that these organisations belong to the members. They're not owned, but the members form that part of the corporate governance model. And this is the document that says, hey, this is how we want it to work. And boards sometimes forget that, I forget who's the, whose organisation it is. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It is an absolute honour to be invited onto a board. And a lot of people aren't aware that the members are actually the ones in charge. I hear it from time to time. Oh, I don't particularly like this particular board member. How do I get rid of that board member? Well, realistically, the only people that can get rid of the board member are the membership at the end of the day. And when you have a problem with a board member, is it because you don't feel they're productive or you don't like them? It's it's one of those situations. We're not here to like one another. We're here to produce something pretty spectacular, and they lose that focus.
And the nature of some not-for-profits too is particularly that span, geographies and sectors and such, that the membership is often made up of, factions, if you like. In other words, a board that sits over a group of, say, state-based organizations, as an example. And each state in itself is an organization, and it then, under the constitution of the larger company is allowed to nominate so many board members onto the board. And so you have a representative from WA and a representative from New South Wales, a representative from Queensland, which is great. But those types of boards end up being parliaments, not boards. And they're particularly difficult to get the right mix, and they often have this issue where the constitution is a barrier to moving it forward. It's very much anchored in the past in those types of things. So these are things to think about in setting those types of organizations up. Think forward about moving forward, and remember about, as always, acting in the best interest of that organization.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic, Derek. What have we got coming up?
Next video, we're going to talk about boards, executive committees, directors, managers, how they differ. This is a precursor, because we're going to move after that into about duties and responsibilities of directors. And that is a big area. So we're actually going to start with that. We're going to give a bit of a curtain raiser to duties and responsibilities in the next video, where we're going to talk about the roles, if you like. We're going to go back to that discussion about, I'm on a board, what's my role versus a manager versus, how do we overcome the grayness that we see with not-for-profits between the role of the board and the role of those that are responsible for the operation. So we're leading into that. And then we're going to, in a few weeks' time, we're going to talk about conflicts of interest and perhaps dispel some myths around that. But Judy, just, in looking at our next program, looking at our next program, thinking, further in advance, these are some of the topic areas that we're thinking of producing videos on. Again, the same format. We're going to pose questions and answer those questions. We're just going to stick to 30 minutes on these formats because they seem to be well received. And these are some of the topics. We're going to talk about minutes. Again, there's a lot of misunderstanding on these topics. The board mix, an area, Jude, that's your particular speciality. As you mentioned, you're a certified auditor. We're going to talk about that. The gap.
Yep, I've got a lot to say about that.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure we're looking forward to that. And we're going to talk about meetings. How do we conduct effective meetings and not waste time? We're going to talk about an emerging area of risk called anti-money laundering, anti-terrorism finance. It's popping up with every not-for-profit. We're on the radar with that. And we need to learn how to, or just consider how to respond quickly to that, and to privacy and data protection, which is, in the news big time at the moment. Subcommittees, the role of the chair, things like delegations, agendas, and there's heap more stuff. But these are the types of things that we're looking forward to. So yeah,
These subjects. We can write a book. We probably will eventually.
we probably should. Okay.
That's great.
Thanks everybody. Look at our channel, Governance Junction channel on YouTube. Well, all our videos are on there, our old ones and our new ones. So thanks for tuning in.
And thanks again, guys. Have a great day.
Yep.